Okay, greetings, everyone. Welcome to the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept, a compensatory counter-racist code, a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, white supremacy by Neely Fuller. This is our study covering pages 195 through 215. And getting started, a question for everyone if they like to share some insight is what are some indications that all people on planet Earth is so-called crazy or insane? Um, what are some indications of this? If anyone would like to share, you could use like examples or speak from your own experience. Um, anyone like to go first?
Um, for me, an example would be people are, the wanting of the idea of a perfect family or perfect relationship. I think it's insane to think about that or to kind of request that. What whether or not they're aware of the system or not, because I have yet to see such thing as a perfect relationship or the perfect family. I guess my question to them would be, what is the perfect relationship or what is the perfect family?
Gregor, I think you're too far from your mic. I'm having an issue hearing you.
Okay, somebody else can go while I try to fix my mic.
All right, thank you. Um, well, for me, I think I for a long time I was interested in rated R movies in my youth. I was one to think that going to prison, harming people, robbing people. I actually think those kind of behaviors were could be fun, and I think that's an indication of my training, my craze training, how I was trained to be insane by this system of racism, white supremacy. And as I think about even the things I did while I was in so-called college, even those things were insane, like going on hikes while having various drugs in my system, and participating in sexual play with white women. Very crazed, pitiful behavior, in my opinion. So I was definitely like trained to think very, very grotesque thoughts and to practice very, very pitiful behaviors. And I blame race and white supremacy for this reality. And I'm very fortunate to be exposed to the code book, the ISIS papers, and many other counter racist material. So I'm able to understand what has exactly been done to myself and people who look like me or people who are classified as non white. Um, just thinking about South Central as a whole and how I literally would see still to this day, people I witnessed growing up over there are still doing the same exact thing, whether it's hanging out on some corner, consuming poison, or getting in petty arguments with one another. That is another indication of how we are just trained to be insane. Because another definition of insanity by Albert Einstein is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. I don't know if they're expecting different results, but they're definitely doing the same behaviors over and over. That, from my experience, only leads to getting various cancers or um, getting in some sort of trouble with the law as someone in my victim unit is currently dealing with consuming too much alcohol and getting letting their emotions get the best of them, and now they're having to plea with white people for their to stay out of greater confinement. So I believe we have been made insane due to various ways, and I think the greatest form of insanity is not admitting that we live in a system of white supremacy and not wanting to replace that system with justice. And I'll end it there.
Can I be heard? Is it better?
Much better.
Okay. I don't know if you heard the first thing I said, but something else that I think is kind of a show of insanity is kind of not learning from the past and continuing to repeat mistakes. Oftentimes, I see people, or me myself, or I see people kind of continuously repeat the same mistakes that they've done in the past and not learn from them and be surprised about the outcome about the outcome, thinking that for some reason it would be different. Kind of going back to what you said, I guess Einstein's definition was. Uh, I believe that to be an example of insanity.
Oh, I would add for like one example of a insanity, or you can probably see this in like any area that there's a large amount of black people where they are allowed to reside. You'll have that one victim that's like 3 streets over, playing their music so loud that you can hear it 3 streets over. And another one, I would say, I know quickly mentioned something about like relationships or something like that, is a high value black man in a system of racism, white supremacy.
Uh, I witnessed something, right? Something really uh, stupid. Actually, whenever I'm on any of the social media, though, where I'm just, and I'm sure many of you as well are just bombarded with pitiful and stupid images of non-white people and also white people as well. But I saw this video and and it was just, it's maybe sad to BH because it's just, I guess they're two black females, and I don't know if this is supposed to be fun or whatever, but due to just it was just the black female. She has on these giant eyelashes to the point where it almost looks like cartoonish, and she's making fun of this other black female, calling her like fat and all kinds of bitches and stuff. And did this kind of content get so popular on TikTok and spread around, and I'm like, this is doing so much damage to black children because they're just the ones who are constantly on TikTok and constantly seeing these images of non-white people being so silly. So that has to be a form of insanity. Being conditioned to like make fun of people who look like you, or wanting to put on all this cosmetics to change how you look, that has to be some a form of insanity and maybe even a form of self hate as well. I see Miss Helen has a hand up.
Hello, hi. 0526. Can you repeat the question again?
So what are some indications that all people on planet Earth are so-called crazy or insane?
Okay, well, speaking about myself, My insanity came with celebrating holidays, pagan holidays, birthdays, to the point that I'm almost going broke, that I was going broke, spending money that I knew I did not have. That was definitely insanity. I could relate to everybody's, what everybody else said on the panel. And thank you. That's it.
That is a very, very good example. I think it's mentioned in this section, but believing in so-called Santa Claus is such insane. To teach children that this white man or even sometimes this black man is coming into your home to deliver gifts on this particular day where it just happens to be covered in white snow. It just nonsense. And how we train our kids to be engulfed in fantasy has to be an indication of our sanity. And yes, I do remember my victim unit going crazy trying to getting myself and my um, siblings the gifts we wanted, the material items we wanted, and definitely stressing over it, and definitely using Christmas and other holidays as like leverage for us to so-called like practice behaviors that they found to be acceptable. So thank you for that, Miss B. That was really something I wasn't even thinking about. And also, I reminded of a of a fellow victim of racism who's really excited about Easter, and she's really she makes a thing to dress her offspring in all the outfits that relate to the holiday and to practice all the rituals. So yeah.
Oh, I have one thing to add with the insanity piece. It's not learning from other victims. I mean, we've been in this system since before I arrived on the planet, and we just don't learn from other victims' mistakes. Like, okay, we've seen victims make this mistake like 200 some times. I'm gonna go ahead and do it too, and I'm gonna get the same result. That goes back to that one quote: "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again." It's just like, how have we not learned from other victims? I mean, as long as the system's going on, we should be trying to make new mistakes, mistakes that haven't been made before.
Very well said. Thank you for that. Would anyone else like to share or answer the question?
I would like to add that in indulging in poison, I guess that goes back to what Dan saying, not learning from other victims. Uh, definitely definitely that, knowing, being full aware of what we're consuming, or me, myself, am eating, and not doing enough to prevent it or end it.
Oh, Helen B just wrote in the chat empathy, and I can speak from that from my own personal experience. I for a long time was totally apathetic, meaning I had absolutely no feelings for very little feelings for myself, my own life, and also I did not care about any people. I didn't care about black people or white people. Anyone could have dropped dead before my eyes. I wouldn't have cared in the slightest because I was conditioned from a very young age to view life as something to be thrown away. So yeah, I had to learn empathy and sympathy as well for my fellow victims. And yeah, because I really didn't care about people at all. But that's what happens when you are in an environment where you going to school, you're hearing about so and so died, so and so got killed, So this is what it does to the young black child brain computer. It just creates monsters and monstrosity, insane thinking people, as the code says. I would like to share the answer from the code book because I think it's really great, and this is on 196, and it states, question: what is correct thing to say when someone says that you are insane, crazy. Answer. Say all victims of racism, non-white people, are insane, crazy. If they were not insane, they would not be victims of racism, white supremacy. Explanation. In order for white supremacy to exist, non-justice must be practiced. The non-white people who are subject to white supremacy are required to behave as people who are imbalanced. People who are imbalanced are insane and should not be expected to think, speak, and act in an insane manner. If any person says that you are pitiful, ignorant, stupid, and or crazy, agree with him or her. Say that is true. No, if you were not in one or more of these conditions, you would not be subject to white supremacy. So that's the answer from the code. I think it makes a lot of sense. I do think the most insane people on the planet are the white supremacists who allow this to happen and who also take pleasure and joy from the system and what the system creates. So yes, we are insane, but the super insane folks are the usual suspects. Uh, would anyone like to share some notes that are comment?
I wanted to comment on that piece because that's one of the things that's really stuck with me ever since I began learning code was that we truly have to be insane to live in a system, live in the under the system of racism and white supremacy, to live with so much death, destruction, and despair around us constantly going on, and to really, for some of us to really be almost comfortable with it. um, I guess me myself, I'm comfortable with it to some extent because it's insane to some extent. But really understanding that this system couldn't function unless people were insane. That's something that, like I mentioned, was something that's really stuck with me, and something that I understood very early on when I started learning about code and learning about the system, because racism, the world that we live in, is a very destructive and I guess vile place. And for us not to be working towards doing something about it 24/7, 365, I think is a true testament to the insanity that's going on the planet.
Indeed. Yeah. I've heard something of a similar being said. Anyone, you got to be a little crazy to survive. But and this system, indeed. Um, it's funny because white people, white supremacists, take pride in being so-called crazy. Think of the movie Joker, a whole culture around being crazy, a whole culture around killing for fun, killing for glory. Um, and this should not be normal. But in a system of racism, white supremacy, killing for glory, killing for fun, killing and laughing about it, this is normal, and that should be a testament to the truth that we are living in a system that needs to be replaced immediately. Um, I really like this is on the same page as well, but I really thought this was like one of the most um, poetic, one of the most profound, poetic, philosophical, insightful things I've ever read. And if I interacted with the usual suspects more, I would definitely love to practice this part of the code. And it's from 169 again, where the code states, question, what is a poetic and truthful way to describe yourself as a non-white person existing within the system of white supremacy racism? And it says, what I am, I owe to the white supremacist racists. What they owe to me. What I am and what they are, neither of us is as we should be. Although you may complain about what I say or complain about what I do, Think of how I got that way and ask if it's true of you. Everything true that is said of me is the result of my training by the powers that be. Note, during the existence of white supremacy, the powers that be are people who practice racism, white supremacy. So I really appreciate this part of the code. Um, yeah, very poetic as as it states, and I am one who has once called myself to be a poetic person as well. So um, very constructive, I would say.
One of the areas similar on the next page, it talks about when non-white people tell you that he or she is not a victim of racism and white supremacy and say the following. I really not, I don't want to say like enjoyed, but I needed this section here. And because I oftentimes, like when you talk to other victims who haven't yet got to the discovery of that they are a victim, they almost like don't know what else to say other than, oh well, I don't feel like I'm a victim or I'm not a victim, you know. So I think like even with a response and having something to say, because oftentimes I just sit there and I'm like, oh, and I just give a confused look, like, and I'm like, how are you not a victim, you know? But I love the idea. It talks about how it says just say appreciations, congratulations. And I think one of the key part was please tell me how I can do it. And I think that is very important because once someone is able to talk through it, they will either um, continue to believe that they are not a victim or almost come to the discovery that they are a victim by simply asking questions. Because once this happens, you're able to continue just asking questions and then they can make their own conclusions about the conversation. So I really appreciated this section.
Indeed. I have asked this question to victims before. I have not got a constructive answer or answer I can understand. But yeah, that's a very important part. Because this denial, there's so much denial around that from Black people, non-white people, that we are living in this system. And I think if in effective numbers, non-white people were to admit the truth, admit to reality, perhaps we can get somewhere and producing justice and not just having the cycle continue forever. Um, but I believe the denial comes from the giant ego we have been trained to have. No one wants to feel powerless, like perhaps, or no one wants to feel like they are helpless. Which brings me to my next question: what can victims of racism, white supremacy do? Because this system may seem insurmountable. It may seem like indestructible. So, what can victims of racism actually do about this system to produce justice, or you know, what can victims do? Is the question.
I think the code itself is, for me, the something that I can do uh, to end the system of racism and white supremacy. I think that we, as victims, don't emphasize what we can do individually. I think it's a part of our training to think that we need a massive movement. I understand that we need a critical mass of people to start practicing code to end the system, but I think oftentimes we as victims feel that we need some kind of organization leading us and directing us, and um, not really understanding that we can do things individually on our own, like practicing code and really changing the way that we think, speak, and act to change the system of racism and white supremacy. I understand that if I begin to think, speak, and act in a counter racist fashion, and the next person does, and that begins to multiply, you start to have that critical mass and that movement that victims are looking for. I hope that answered the question.
Definitely an answer. Thank you. Yeah, I would answer saying that just under just the beginning, attempting to understand racism, white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, is could be one of even the bare minimum things that a victim can do, and then beginning to change their, like you said, thought, speech, and behavior by just telling the truth. No longer listening to music that is gonna allow them to believe lies that you can like live this so-called like perfect life. You can like work really hard and get all these riches. I would think I would also say that no longer participating in what the code calls ghetto culture or ghetto glorification. I think that would deal a huge blow if Black people were to stop participating in ghetto glorification, which could also be interpreted as Black people developing deep self-Black respect, as Dr. Wellesley mentions in her book. I think you don't have to mention white supremacy to practice practice deep Black self-respect if the term is so produces such fear and anxiety for the non-white person or Black person. But I think there's so many things that the individual person can do. One of the best things is to learn code, practice code, and to understand how the system works and what the system has particularly done to us, and how it has made us monsters and monstrosities, and how we don't live, should not live in this way. Ms. B, would you like to share?
Hello, can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. One of the things to piggyback off of Kawaii's the statement that he made, be the example. Follow um, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. She had a list of things to do, like don't curse, don't use profanity, don't drink, don't do drugs, stuff like that. To make that a part of your life, to incorporate that into your life and be the example. I think that helps a lot. And let me see what else. Yeah. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Oh, I would add, you can only really, uh, mm, trying to find the right word to use for it. Uh, but I guess I'll just say responsible, but you can only account for your own actions. Uh, that's what I would say. And again, like what was previous said, you be the example. You are the leader, the follower. That's the code. And then one other thing I wanted to say in regards to the one point that was brought up on 197 about other non-whites or especially Black people in denial about racism. One response that you can give, this isn't in the code book, but you can say white people can show you better than I can tell you.
Yes, it seems that's going to be the only way a lot of non-white people began to get serious if white people show them that they're nothing more than some sort of creature on this planet to be dominated. When maybe that will help one to realize that you're not anyone's wife, you're not anyone's boo. You are a victim of racism that should be spending their time and energy trying to replace the system, trying to spread the truth that we don't should not be living in this manner. Um, Mr. Ethan, would you like to share?
Yes, I I just what that person said earlier about white people can show you better than I can tell you. I think that is why I like the idea of asking white people questions in front of non-white people, and so that if you ask a good series of questions, you can really, and non-white people are watching, they can learn from they can observe a white person giving answers that they did not expect to get. And they can follow the conversation and see, like, wait a minute. They can have an eye-opening moment. I tried that earlier, the past couple of days, by asking about, asking a set of questions based on Dr. Wilson's work. There were 4 questions. Do you want your children to be white? Second, do you want your grandchildren to be white? Third was, what do you think other people will answer to those, other white people will answer to these questions? And then the fourth question was, what do these answers reveal about a system of racism, white supremacy, where white people are the minority and are genetic recessive to the world's non-white population? And I got about 15 or 16 answers in this Facebook group called Whiteness and Anti-Racism. And the group is mainly white women, some white men, and some non-white women, and like probably 5 Black males. And what I noticed was that almost everyone was saying, like, it doesn't matter what my children or grandchildren look like. But then when you're starting to answer the question what other white people would say, then they would say, like, yes, other white people probably don't want to have their children be white. And then for the last question, where I'm basically putting Dr. Wilson's theory out there and saying, like, seeing if any of them are going to be honest, the majority of them pretended like they didn't understand. But recently, yesterday, one white person said, no, I don't want my children to be white, don't want my non-white children to be white, because I still have racist and colonial thinking and I would harm the child. And then that woman said to the third question, it means, she said, most white people actually would answer the opposite way. They would say, no, it doesn't matter, but in truth, they mean yes. So she was just saying, and then for the fourth question, she started to do some gymnastics, saying that racism isn't about genetics, it's about white privilege and social structures and so on. So this was the first fish that was at least attempting somewhat to be honest, but obviously lied. And also said, like, I am racist, she more or less said. She said, I have racist thinking. So what I did was, I stayed with her and I asked her a series of questions so that any of the non-white victims in the group could hopefully see, because what this white woman was saying was that there's no such thing as recessiveness for white people. But then she continued further in the conversation saying that non-white people, when there's interracial coupling, the children aren't necessarily non-white. But then later she said that some of these, and she gave Meghan Markle's child as an example. So what I did was I said, okay, well, what about Meghan Markle? Is she white? Because she has a white father. I didn't say that, but after a while she admitted, like, yeah, Meghan isn't white. And then because she had said earlier that people who appear to be white, if they're seen with their non-white parent, then that person who appears to be white loses this whiteness. I said, then Does that mean that Megan's child, who appears to white, probably isn't white as well? She hasn't answered the question yet. It's been several hours. But I think I made my point that recessiveness is a thing, and that this woman was straight up lying and probably practicing racism all along. And I shared that with some non-white people, and they thought it was somewhat constructive. I mute my line.
Thank you. Yeah, I have it in my code too. It's probably if I'm engaging with white people, I prefer it to be in some sort of audio, not some kind of written exchange. But um, I'm sure you have a way of being on code and about and what you were doing. So thank you. It's very
Excuse me, sir. Why is that why do you prefer to go audio? For me, I would feel like that is too fast for me, and I need that written proof to share with others.
Oh well, just because I already have wasted so much time arguing with white people about the problem, so I don't TBH don't even care to talk to white people about the problem because unless they're gonna solve the problem, I think my time and energy is best focused on victims, which even brings me to the next point from 198, which states from the code question: what is the best? Because I found myself always arguing with particularly non-white people about, hey, we're living in a system of racism and your ghetto glorification and your ghetto culture is also is like why it's being able to be here for so long and that how you're contributing to it. So but if I hadn't been practicing this portion of the code, this is not my first time reading it. I just neglected to practice the portions of the code that will prevent me from shadow boxing, I guess. So the question is, what is the best and correct thing to say when seeking to avoid long or confusing arguments about the cause of non-white people's problems during the existence of racism, white supremacy? Answer: say either the problems of non-white people of the known universe are caused by the white supremacists, or the non-white people of the known universe are by nature inferior to white people, or both. Notes: during the existence of white supremacy, and according to compensatory counter-racist logic, it is correct for the non-white people of the known universe to either blame the white supremacists for the problems on non-white people, or say that non-white people have more problems than white people do because non-white people are inferior to white people. There's no other logical explanation for the existence of non-white people's problems. Regardless of the cause, the solution is the same: replace white supremacy with justice. And I think white people have proven that they're not gonna replace this system with justice. So our time and energy, well, my time and energy will be spent on attempting to get victims, or because perhaps I could be I'm very like confused in the system as well, but I'm starting to suspect that there's something perhaps within white people that prevents them from wanting to produce justice. Perhaps it's some kind of genetics. I don't know. Not a expert. I just there has to be various reasons why they won't produce justice when they have the ability to do so, and they have trained us up to be people who don't want to produce justice. So there has to be some kind of cause. Yorubu teaches me that it is due to their acilia. It is due to their genetic makeup or something like that. They are predetermined to want to practice racism. And I'm reminded of a Cow's episode where um, Gus was told that a white woman told him she has been racist since conception, and she didn't say that for no reason. I think it has truth to that. So again, my time and energy will be spent with the people who can produce justice, And then hopefully white people will decide once we have effective numbers to either produce justice or kill all of us. And I am fine with either. I am just not okay with being a slave, a prisoner of war. Edward Williams, would you like to share something?
Just a question based on the conversation. The question is, eventually, Black people are going to get to this question. And the question is, can white people stop practicing racism and white supremacy? That's the question. It's a question for anybody and everybody whoever wants to attempt to answer it.
I think the record tells me no. Would anyone else like to answer?
I don't believe they can. I think history has shown, the evidence shows that they are not able to practice justice. The only thing that they are able to practice is racism, white supremacy, because it puts them in, it satisfies their fear of genetic annihilation, it satisfies their ceiling, satisfies their culture. So to answer the question, I don't think that they can.
I don't think that they can because the thought of feeling superior than others and knowing that they feel a lot of non-white people have a lot to bring to the table. It's just better to just take what they bring and tweak it to make it better so that you can always be above them so that they need you.
I would say no. If they haven't stopped by now, they're not going to stop. And if Black people disappeared off the planet, or people classified as Black disappeared off the planet, they would just have a new group that they would subjugate, and that group would take our place.
Wow. Yeah, they're already trying to spread this to other planets. So yeah, I don't believe they. I think there's so much evidence that points to the reality that they're addicted to subjugating people in mass numbers, and there's no indication in this momentum of what they're doing to stop. Um, I think it's very important to just learn this truth from white people. White people, like was mentioned earlier, white people will show you better than non-white people can apparently. Yeah, it's probably best to learn like this truth from white people. I see Mr. Ethan has a hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that that was an excellent question, Edward. And I think if someone is under some deep subconscious psychological fear of that if they don't control the world, if their people don't control the world, that means they will not be around. And if the fear is so strong that they can't even admit to it, or very few of them can admit to it or talk to about it, then it's unlikely that they will be able to stop the behavior that springs from that fear. Also, in this Facebook group where they're talking about whiteness, they like to swing around the word white fragility, and they talk about, the way they approach their racism there is a joke. It's interesting in that they keep talking about they're trying to stop practicing stop exerting their privilege, whatever that means, which I interpret to mean racism. But they're trying, but they're failing, but they'll just try again, and they just keep trying. But so they take it as this refinement of calling racism white privilege allows them to be even more relaxed about practicing racism and think of it as like a bad habit that they have to stop. Anyway, but I think that's an excellent question and one that I will probably ask white people. Thank you.
I'd like to see the answers if you do. so
Post them in the group.
Yeah, you should.
I'm sorry.
Said I'll post them in the Facebook group that I have.
Okay, good deal.
Yeah, I have it in my code that I don't use the terms white fragility or white privilege. If anything, I'm going to say white power or racism, white supremacy. And I think changing our vocabulary to just saying racism, white supremacy or white power would do a lot to get white people to let white people know that we are beginning to understand this game they have been running on us for a while. And when I say learning from white people, just in the way they use words, like a white person saying white privilege, white fragility, or blaming it on white men only, that is them practicing white supremacy. You can learn from that behavior, and that's one of their many methods of practicing deceit, because the system is ran through mostly deceit and direct and non-direct violence. So many ways and things to learn from the race masters on planet Earth.
Okay, I got another question.
Mr. Williams, can you answer the question? Do you think they can stop?
Do I think white people can stop practicing racism, white supremacy?
Yes.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if they can, if they can't. Counter racism is supposed to be designed for the non-white people who are victims of racism, white supremacy, to get us to change our behavior so that we don't support the system that is against us. That's what it's supposed to be about. It's not supposed to be, trying to figure out if they are good white people or if they're good non-white people. It's not supposed to be about that at all. I've been asked that question. Can white people stop practicing racism, white supremacy? And my response is always the same. I don't know. I practice counter racism because I recognize how I participate in the system of racism, white supremacy. And so I want to change my behavior so that I don't participate in the system. Now, one or two things don't have to happen in order for me just to completely, totally not participate in the system. Either the system is going to have to go away or I'm going to have to go away. I mean, that's a reality that's very difficult for many non-white people to accept. I have accepted it years and years ago. And so I try to use most of my time and energy working against the system itself.
I remember you saying you had another question, Mr. Edward
Oh,
Williams.
yeah. So the other question is, if you think white people cannot stop practicing racism, white supremacy, if you think they can't stop, how is counter racism going to help you produce a system of justice? See, this is the clincher question. This is the clincher. No matter how hard you try, if you think they can't stop, how is counter racism going to help you to produce a system of justice? And I'm telling you, I've asked this question to non-white people, to Black people who have been, listening and meeting and talking with Mr. Fuller and Dr. Wells a whole lot of years before I got involved in it. And they have not answered that question. If you think they can't stop mistreating people based on color, how is counter-racism going to help you to produce a system of justice? So that may be a question that, people have to go off and think about. And I don't want to, detract from the purpose of the meeting today. But I mean, if you come up with an answer to that question, please let me know what your answer is. I'm off the mic.
I would imagine and think that in affected numbers, we would force them to stop mistreating people and guaranteeing those who need the help receive the most help. And if we have to have some sort of position or a job where we are monitoring white people to make sure they're not mistreating anyone or thing, then that would have to exist in a system of justice. But as for their thoughts, I think perhaps I don't know, maybe the conditioning of like thousands of years of attack black, kill black, maybe there's no coming back from that, or it's going to take a system of justice to come back from that. But that is a really interesting question. But this is why I believe this is a numbers game. So whether or not they can stop or not doesn't mean that we can't have a system of justice, because logic says there's more non-white people, and if the majority of non-white people began to understand what's been done to them and what is happening to them, then perhaps they can do that, kill all of us or produce justice.
Okay, so your first response was that, and I'm not picking on you, I'm just trying to follow the logic here, is that the effective number, I believe is the phrase that you used, the effective number of non-white people practice counter-racism, that would force white people to practice justice. Okay, so did your answer change that they can stop or they can't stop? Because if they can't stop, I don't care what number of non-white people practice counter-racism. If they can't stop practicing racism, white supremacy, they can't stop. Either they can or they can't.
So I suppose my new answer is that they can only stop if they're forced to stop.
Okay.
I don't see them using their own will or abilities to stop. But I do think we can force them, and effective numbers can force them to stop, especially if we all agree to stop having sex with them. I think that would do a huge blow to them wanting to maintain or applying the system. But I could be totally incorrect. Yeah. Mr. Eaton?
I'd like to jump in here. I think these questions are really getting to the heart of what we're dealing with here. And but if we are going to force them to stop practicing racism I before you answered, I also thought like, okay, I practice counter-racism, and after a while that rubs off on someone else and they start in practicing counter-racism, and like you say, 0526, then it becomes a number game. Eventually enough people, non-white people, practice counter-racism. And if it is a forcing function on white people to stop practicing racism, if that's what is going to stop them, that we force them by our practice, then what happens when we are no longer forcing them? Are we going to have to continually force them forever and ever? And that's
Right.
only when.
And that's what counter racism is about, right? Non-white people changing our behavior so that we produce a system of justice. And I agree that my answer is the same as Sue's. It's,
Well,
that forces them to change. That forces them to stop practicing racism, white supremacy. And we can't force them to stop and then let them slide back into it. Yeah, when we change our behavior as individual people, practicing compensatory counter-racist code, then we practice that forever. We teach that to our children, they practice it. They teach it to their children, they practice it, and on and on and on. So that is what counter-racism is supposed to be designed to do, to force white people to stop, to give up the idea of mistreatment of people based on color.
Okay, but Edward, I mean,
Yes, sir.
that's not, I think your statement is only partially correct. It's not to force white people, it is to get non-white people to practice counter-racism, which in turn may cause white people to start practicing racism. It seems to be more important that large numbers of non-white people practice counter-racism, and then if that because if non-white, it's not if we let them slide on us, if we don't have enough numbers, that's the linchpin right there. It's non-white people then that become most important.
Well, I don't think I said which is more important. See, the thing about counter-racism is it's a strategy to get to producing justice. Counter-racism is not the production of justice. Counter-racism is counter-racism. And I think a lot of people, especially initially, when they start studying counter-racist code and counter-racist logic, they think that maybe they are in the process, that they are actually producing justice by practicing counter-racism, and they're not. They just practicing counter-racism. The whole point is to get to a point. The whole idea is to get to a point where we are living in a system of justice. That's the whole point. The practice of counter-racism is a means to get there. So like I said before, it's designed for non-white people to change our behavior. Now, the changing of our behavior is going to force them. That's the concept part, is going to force white people to stop practicing racism, white supremacy, and to get on board to producing a system of justice. That's the concept part in the title.
Dr. Senkiu, would you like to chime in?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, I came to the logical conclusion that just like there's 4 stages, or there was 4 stages of white supremacy, there are 4 stages of counter-racism. There's probably 5 stages, I guess, because I would think there's a promotion stage, which is where we're at now. And then, at some point, if we get the effective number, then we get to the establishment, then we'll have the maintenance, and then we'll have the expansion, and then we'll have to refine it. As Mr. Williams said, we'll just have to keep passing, Mr. Ed Williams, we'll just have to keep passing it on to our children, generation to generation until justice is established.
Yeah, that's perfectly logical. And I think this entire exchange is a great segue into the concept of victims guarantee qualifications, known as VGQ. And I'm just gonna read the first two paragraphs of VGQ. So the code states, according to compensatory counteringrws logic, and as long as white supremacy exists, every victim of white supremacy, non-white person, possesses the victim's guaranteed qualification, or VGQ, of saying anything that he or she chooses to say about racism, and or counter racism. During the existence of white supremacy, all of the non-white people of the known universe are the direct or indirect victims of white supremacy. Therefore, all victims are self-qualified to say anything that they choose to say about race, racism, and or counter-racism. They are self-qualified because they are victims of white supremacy and because no person has proven to be correctly qualified to prevent them from being victims. So I like VGQ because it gives every victim, no matter of their so-called level of intelligence or so-called knowledge, it gives everyone the freedom and ability to say what they want about this. And I like to add to this my own part of the code, but it doesn't mean it's correct. You know, it doesn't mean what they're saying under their VGQ is correct. It's just there to prevent us from bickering, squabbling with one another while the white supremacists keep on doing what they're doing and continue being amused by our squabbling amongst ourselves. But not to say that we're doing it right now, but I thought that was a really good segue into VGQ, and that was also on my notes to get through. Um, anyone like to share?
Yes, I would like to say that Little Nas X has VGQ for his video. So I'm going to leave him alone.
For VGQ, I'd like to add, I'm not sure if I have used VGQ correctly or the way it was intended to be used in the past, but oftentimes if I am participating in activities that one may deem unconstructive, I've used VGQ, and I don't know whether if that is to more so shield myself or to or to actually prevent an argument. When I say shield myself, I mean kind of give myself a pass on what I'm doing, even though I know it may not be entirely of constructive value. But I should share that as far as VGQ.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong. Those who have studied this material much longer than I, but I don't know if the video Lil Nas X video is VGQ because I don't believe he is talking about race or racism or counter racism. So I don't think that's VGQ. I think the best response is just to say that Lil Nas X is a victim of racism and white supremacy, and he did what he did. But I don't think that's a VGQ. But I may be incorrect. But yeah, I don't believe it is.
I see your point and concede it. I'll go with he said what he said. Thank you.
So I really.
Well, it's. I think one thing that Mr. Fuller points out very well is to follow the logic. I mean, really follow the logic. And when he says logic, he's referring to counter racism logic. And you can verify that with him. That is exactly what he's talking about. So and I liken this situation to a preacher in a church. And I'm not picking on preachers, and I'm not picking on religion at all. but I liken it to a preacher in a church telling people to read the code book of that church. No matter what that book is, it could be, the Quran, it could be the Bible, it could be whatever, rather than showing the person how to develop and strengthen their relationship with the Creator. Because it takes more than just reading a book in order to do that. And Mr. Fuller is saying all the time, follow the logic, follow the logic, follow the logic. But I don't think people really grasp what that means. So VGQ is victim logic. That's basically what it is. In other words, rape victims, people who are victims of rape, they don't challenge each other about being victims of rape. They don't do that. You never see two victims of rape standing up in a room arguing, saying, you weren't raped. No, you weren't raped. They don't do that. And this logic is already in the universe. And you can use it in various situations. You can see it happening. People looking right at it and can't see what they're looking at. And what Fuller's attempting to do is use that logic, victim logic, for victims of white supremacy. Because the white people who practice racism, white supremacy, they have to keep us focused on and in conflict with each other. So when we stop arguing with each other about being victims of racism, white supremacy, we are working against the system on that alone. So VGQ is very important, but a lot of people really don't understand what it is, and they don't know how it applies. And so you wind up having a lot of conversations that didn't happen, because somebody will just say, yeah, VGQ. We don't have to argue about it to discuss it, and help me understand. And the other person is, okay, help me understand, what it is that we're discussing and what we're trying to get out of this discussion. Rather than to argue about it or just turn away and say, yeah, you got VGQ. And that's the end of it. And both people leave the conversation not understanding, the value that the other person brings to the subject or topic. So you got to use that with a grain of salt and understand how victim logic works. Victims of a car accident, they don't argue with each other about, who was most victimized. So that's the logic behind VGQ. I'm off the mic.
And I'd like to say too, in a conversation I had with Fuller, when he was speaking on the logic, I remember him saying it comes with the universe. And he said, what gets you there is questioning. If we question more about what's happening to us as victims and how we're being victimized, we should be able to get to that point. And I notice people throw, I've seen a lot of victims throw VGQ around too, like they use it as a, it seems to me that the system, the racist white supremacists have trained us not to question. They've made us view questioning as something that's offensive, when, you know, when the person could just be asking a question. They just want to know. All they're doing is just trying to seek more understanding. And because we've been trained not to question, and then you got all this stuff that centers around a question, you know, oh, it's stupid question, you know, and you got a bunch of us who are afraid to ask a question because we're afraid to appear stupid, or, you know, like, you know, we don't want to appear, a lot of us don't want to appear like we don't know, because, you know, the system is all about deception. So it's got this whole thing about, you know, you always got to come off like you know what you're talking about when you don't. But I noticed that, you know, after my conversation with Fuller about that, and I started questioning things more, the logic, you know, the logic comes. You know, we
Right.
all can arrive. You'll find that most of us arrive at the same conclusion about a lot of this stuff, this being a lot of this racism that's being practiced, because it is the logic that'll lead us there. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Edward Williams and Dr. Sim Q. So I think this is also another really important part of the code, the aspect on Black leaders. So this is on page 200, and it states, "Do not speak for as a representative of another person, particularly on racial matters, unless that person asks you to do so. Express your own views only. Be persistent in trying to explain and or suggest to others what you think should have been done in regards to race, racism, and or counter racism. Do not, however, talk about race, racism, or counter racism to show who, to people who show by word or deed or by silence that they do not want to listen. Talk about such matters only when people indicate that they want to hear what you intend to say. Do not be hostile or discourteous in your speech or action towards any other non-white person who does not agree with what you say or what you do in regard to race, racism, and or counter racism. Do not comment on anything that another non-white person says about race, racism, or counter racism unless you are expected to do so or unless you choose to do so after being asked to do by that person." Well, I read the wrong part. I was supposed to read the part about Black leaders, but I'm just gonna summarize it as best as I can. But essentially, there's no such thing as a Black leader within the system of racism, white supremacy. There's only a Black spokesperson who says things about what is being done and what should or should not be done with regard to Black people or about anything. And essentially, the true Black leaders are racist man and racist woman. So I was always very confused, especially growing up, as to why we were always being taught in school that I was always being taught that my leader was Martin Luther King, then Malcolm X, and then other Black people that I can't recall right now. But I've never have ever felt connected or viewed those people as Black leaders because I don't know. I just didn't make sense in my young brain computer that I had a leader or like a so-called role model or anything like that. So now being exposed to the code, that makes so much sense. And they use this imaginary Black leaders to really control and confuse a lot of victims into participating in certain behaviors and for okaying a lot of things. For example, like they will use. I've seen in her broadcast of them trying to get Tyler Perry to no, not Tyler Perry, but trying to get church, so-called church religious leaders to convince Black people to take the vaccine, whatever. and that's just how they can corral a lot of non-whites to do stuff under the guise of the black leader said to do it, or the community leader said to do it, and we also don't have any such thing called communities. But that's what I have to say. Wait for
Yeah, regarding black leaders, I really like the term black spokesperson, because oftentimes before I started practicing counter racism, I would see, a lot of black people come on TV and start speaking, and the white supremacists kind of using that as them speaking for all of black people. In particular, I can't remember what kind of event had happened. I want to, part of me wants to say it was a natural disaster when they went to go find, I think they were interviewing Buster Rhymes or somebody, a celebrity of that sort, and asking their opinion about it. And I just remember thinking, why are they speaking to this person about such a sensitive topic? The part in particular that I highlighted or paid very close attention to was the second paragraph about being persistent in trying to explain or suggest ideas in regards to race and racism, but do not, however, talk about race or racism to people who show by word or deed or by silence that they do not want to listen. That's something that I've personally kind of struggled with. It may be, I don't know if it's considered showing off, but I feel that counter racism is definitely something that people need to hear and they need to know about, whether they want to hear about it or not. Black people need to get on this and start practicing it immediately. So I've been very persistent in when I've been trying to so-called recruit counter racists, recruit black people to start practicing counter racism, whether or not they wanted to hear it or not. I will send text messages, I will send videos, and etc. So most of the time, I will be met with silence, or I will be met with a "I'm not interested." Then either I would move into asking questions, and then I will be met with silence and no kind of reply at all. So I thought that this part was very necessary for me to read. I imagine I will still be somewhat persistent, but I will definitely take into account that uh, much more codified to I guess kind of leave those people alone. I guess it's a better use of my time and energy to stop stop pestering people. I wouldn't say it's pestering, but you can only do so much.
well said, Mr. Kwaku. Mr. Eaton, do you like
Yeah,
to?
I think, thank you, 0526. Personally, my quote at the moment is I'm only interested in talking about racism with victims who are like ourselves here, who are interested in studying and in improving our understanding of the system. Um, and I generally don't talk about it with victims who don't have any interest or who haven't asked me what I think. And I also talk about it with people who classify themselves as white, who claim to be anti-racist. Those are so I can run experiments and learn some more about the system, and probably showing the non-white victims who are watching something new, hopefully. So I have no problem with that, adopting that part of the code, and I think I can see how the code that following that code works is because just being here in this session and listening to those of us that have been spending some time and refining our understanding of the system and of counter racism, I can see like, I'm gaining new insight. So I think that if someone asks me a question about racism and I give an answer that makes them go, aha, then that will be my contribution to spreading the word. But until I am skillful enough to produce an aha moment in someone else, I want to improve my own knowledge. Thank you.
Oh, I would add in regards to the black leaders, like the only black leader is like, you leading yourself. So like everyone participating here right now, they're their own leader. They find this constructive visitation plan constructive. I mean, and what else I was going to say in regards to the black leaders? I think Mr. Fuller goes in on about preaching code. It's a waste of time trying to like recruit other victims. I don't really do that. I enjoy, or not enjoy, but I find it constructive communicating with everyone here. But yeah, what Mr. Fuller says about, don't preach code. And I would just go back to that one point I had mentioned earlier. When you're dealing with other victims or non-whites, you can just say that one phrase: white people can show you better than I can tell you. And then once they get shown, they might come your way and might be receptive to some of this constructive information.
Well, well said, Mr. Dan. Thank you. You as well, Ethan.
Oh, I just thought of one other thing too. In regards to Dr. Cambon, I know he had mentioned something like when trying to communicate with like other victims and stuff. He said like 25 to 35 is like the time you can possibly get to them, but by the time they hit 40, it's a done deal, and they got white concepts frozen in time, like in their brain computer.
Yeah, for some victims that may be correct, but I've seen so-called older victims find an interest in learning the code. So not to be cliche, but there may be hope for everyone. But I could be very incorrect. Um, Mr. Ian, would you like to share?
Yeah, I'm very curious about this phenomenon. Like, why are we here? How did we get out of the matrix? Like, how I'm curious, like, why is it that I am in, well, how did I identify this as my mission in life? And how did you guys identify this? This is something I would like to study amongst non-white people who are attempted counter-racist. And I really would like to hear from Edward if he has any observations on that.
We're not out. We're talking about getting out. It's like the entire universe is a prison, and all of the non-white people are prisoners in that prison. And we're talking about getting out of the prison, coming up with strategies and techniques to get out of it. Talking about things we need to do, things we need to say in order to tear the prison down. I mean, we're not out of the matrix yet. That's the scientific response, yet. But there is a way to get out.
My question, Edward, is how is it that we're even talking about getting out? What is why is it that we're having this conversation? How did we switch from not having to having this conversation? That's something interesting to me, because I think that could be useful. That knowledge would be useful to helping people who aren't interested in having this conversation switch to having this conversation.
Okay. I'll set up a call and we can talk about it. And anyone who wants to join that call, I'll email it out to everybody. That doesn't take away from the CR WS Book Club call, but just to explore that. I've been saying I was going to do that for months. Set up a call on the counter racism website. I haven't done it yet, but I'll set one up.
Yeah, I would love to. Would think it would be constructive to participate in something like that. Miss Eden, just so I understand your question, it's like how we became counter racist or being counter racist. I have no problem. I'll definitely share mine. Started.
But excuse me, sorry, but before you do, can we find a way to like get contact information to Edward? Is that something you can?
Oh yeah, we could do that. We could definitely do that after the meeting.
Thank you, Edward.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear your story.
Oh yeah, I'll make it really brief. So it started when I started reading the book The Delectable Negro, and I would begin to wonder. No, I wanted to know why white people were eating and raping black males and black females for quite a while, and then I got my hands on the ISIS papers, and then that answered my question to why white people were doing the things that I learned about in The Delectable Negro. And then I also discovered from that book that I have a personal responsibility to help put an end to this system. And then I also got my hands on Neely Fuller's book, and that's pretty much it. I just wanted to know why things were the way they are.
Yeah, Dr. Wilson does a very good job of explaining the why.
Yeah.
What a lot of Black people don't understand is the how. And when I first got into counter racism, I was talking to all the people who had been into, been in it, Josh Wickett, Bill Reeves, Sabrina, blah, 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 on down the line. So many people. And I was asking how so much, they asked me if I was half Indian. So I was even asked by one person to stop asking how. So I think a lot of people are missing the how part. But if you can help a non-white person to solve a problem, and also in the process of doing that, help them to understand how to replace white supremacy with justice at the same time, that's it. That's it. And it can be done. I've done it. I've seen other people do it.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead. You weren't finished. My bad.
No. Go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I definitely be interested in that call, and in response to this Mr. Williams #2, is I would say like the codified life chose me. I didn't choose it, or maybe in reverse to that Matrix question.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to.
Maybe that's it.
I'd like to answer the question. I mean, I guess just to kind of give background, hopefully this answers the question, but for quite some time I had kind of noticed and wondered why all these awful things were happening in the world, and specifically to Black people. I would say I was for some time concerned about racism, but it seemed like everything that I was learning confused me more. And I eventually, came upon the ISIS papers, and code book. I think the first book I read was Miseducation. But those kind of resources were kind of the things that started to make a lot of sense. And the book club as well. That's when I first was introduced to biases papers and code.
Thank you for the question, Ethan, and thanks for sharing, Mr. Kwaku. So I have a question. How can we promote a universal lifestyle, which is, let me find it, I think it's on 210. Universal lifestyle based on, this is from 210. And the Sun quotes, universal lifestyle based on the use of truth, that which is, in a manner that best helps to produce justice and correctness in all areas of activity. So how can we start leading this concept? I understand leading by example is a way, but I hope there's more ways to do this.
I think that you have to have self-respect for yourself and others, but also help those that need the most constructive help and keep the ball rolling of having a discussion of justice and the examples you want justice to be or how you want to see justice. What would the world look like? SF of having a discussion of white supremacy and what's wrong with it. Yeah, we can have those discussions, but we need to get the ball rolling of how can we solve those problems because we don't know how.
Yeah, I definitely don't know how. I only have ideas of what I think may work. But does someone else want to share as well?
Could you ask the question again?
How can we promote a universal lifestyle based on the use of truth, that which is, in a manner that best helps produce justice and correctness in all areas of activity? And I did think you had a great answer and suggestion, Curry's, talking about justice and what that would actually look like more versus just the wickedness of white supremacy.
Yeah, I would agree. One thing recently that I have come in that I have found actually very constructive is not so much to talk about the system of racism, white supremacy, and what it is, or not talking about white supremacy so much, but rather shifting it and talking about producing justice. So producing, I guess, a lifestyle in order to produce a system of justice. Um, yeah, so I would have to agree with what Teresa said. I think it's very important to talk about producing justice. I personally have found myself talking a lot more about white supremacy and the white supremacists, much more than I have been talking about producing justice. Something to include in my attempt to create a universal lifestyle.
Well said. So another question is that comes from 211, which is do non-white people have friends? And I think the system of white supremacy teaches us that a friend is someone that you have some kind of close bond with, just so we all have like some kind of definition of what a friend is. Because, but I for one remember getting into really silly arguments with my so-called best friends and whatnot, and just me slowly realizing that actually I really only did have associates, which is what my answer would be, that no, we don't have friends. And also reading Destruction of Black Civilization really reinforced the reality that Black people really don't have friends, because I learned through our history just various groups of people have just banded together, it seems, to just destroy or help to destroy Black people in particular. So that also reinforces the this piece of the code, which states that um, uh, uh, white supremacist racists do not allow their victims, non-white people, to have friends, from 211. So I think what destruction also has reinforced and taught me is that there was once an ancient system of racism and white supremacy, and it's just been being refined for so long. Um, Mr. Eden, would you like to share answer?
I think we probably have I think I have at least one friend potentially, and that's the man in the mirror. And yeah, that's probably at least one friend an individual can count on yourself.
Excellent, black excellent response, I would say. Um,
Oh, I would add, I think none of us here should be using the word friends unless it's like in an example or something. I think we're all associates here. Word guy, word guy.
Agreed. Um, yeah, I once yeah, I don't know where I got this idea from. It could have been from one of the quotes in the back of the code book, but I just believe that if I were to have a friend, they would just have the same ends as me, which is producing justice and spending their time and energy trying to solve this race problem. So I think that would qualify as a friend if I were to use the word, but I think associates is definitely more codified and the best approach, because white supremacists love um, killing so-called friends and leaders of non-white people. So no friends. We're not allowed to have friends.
Plus, friendship is hard because I think people base the word friend so vaguely because we kind of bond off our traumas or bond off the bad things we experience. We kind of bond off of the things that we can relate to each other, but never trying to solve the issue on why we have those problems. We kind of bleed on each other with our traumas to our friends, quote unquote.
Oh, another thing I'd like to add is for the friend, that is on page 127 of the word guide. And I can read it really quick too. Friend, use this word with caution. Use the word associate to apply to any person, white or non-white, with whom you interact within in any manner in any area of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, counter war. When others use this word, ask for a detailed explanation that you can easily understand. Ask questions, and the questions for friend are: what exactly is a friend? What exactly are the qualifications for friendship? Is there any way to prove friendship other than by producing justice and correctness between and among all people, all creatures, in all things during the existence of white supremacy, racism? How can a white person qualify for friendship with a non-white person without speaking and acting effectively to replace white supremacy, racism with justice, balance between people? Can a white supremacist racist be a friend, or any person who is not a white supremacist racist, and or to any person who is not white? And again, that is on page 127 of the Word Guide. And I think one other thing I would add is we're not here to be your friends. We're here to give you constructive information.
Agreed. And definitely thank you for reading that definition. So
I wanted to, before just real quick, I wanted to comment on the idea of friends, because I've noticed this a lot lately under the system of racism, white supremacy, really putting a lot of effort into these friends and these friendships. I see it in all kinds of media. I mean, I watch a lot. I used to watch a lot of anime, and for those of you who may not be familiar, every single one of them has some. Even every kind of show has a real huge emphasis on friends. I'm not sure what exactly. Ever since I started practicing code, I'm not sure what makes those people friends. From those shows, it said it basically is anybody that you're willing to put your life on the line for. But I don't think that in the same way are they willing to put their lives on the line for you. Um, I see a real concentrated effort to kind of force victims into relying more on their friends than anything else to overcome problems. But from personal experience, I understand that these people who are your so-called friends can be some of the most toxic people in your life. I have many, I guess, associates, now former associates, who, for whatever reason, would rather not practice code, but once upon a time were considered my friends. They are down to do anything unconstructive, but once we start talking about being constructive, they don't want any parts of it. And that can, it can be hard, or it used to be hard, because those are people that you've been trained to really care for and to really, I guess, care about what they have to say and what they think. So I just wanted to mention that under the system, I see a real concentrated effort to put a lot of value in friends and friendships. Very true. Anime does prove that the power of friendship can solve any problem. Will damn near give up their whole life just for friendship. 05, you're muted if you're talking.
I wasn't talking. I was just listening. Mr. Williams, Mr. Edward Williams, were you cut off recently? Okay.
Was I cut off?
Yeah, I thought I heard you start talking, and then there was silence. So I may be incorrect.
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Um. Yeah. There's so much conditioning and entertainment to convince non-white people, especially black people, that they have friends, people they can rely on, count on, when they're in so-called danger and trouble. But no, you're your best friend if you have any is yourself, you know. So that's that piece of the code that I think if a lot of non-whites had in their brain computer, they could save a lot of time and energy doing silly things with so-called friends. But I may be incorrect. I really appreciated the part of the code which talks about gangs, and I'm just gonna read the explanation regarding gangs on 211. And it says the system of white supremacy is a system that is designed to promote violence and teach, bribe, and or force people to be violent and to glorify and worship violence. During the existence of white supremacy, all non-white so-called gang members are the direct or indirect product of those white people who participate in the practice of white supremacy. Therefore, during the existence of white supremacy, each and every non-white so-called gang member is at all times being used to speak and act violently to support racism, or he or she is speaking and acting to counter racism and resist being used to support racism, white supremacy. So is is he saying is this code saying that participating in counter racism is also like some sort of gang activity? Is that what's being said here, or am I confused?
Yeah, I don't think that's what it's saying, but I could be confused as well. So um, there was a guy back in the day who used to always say that counter racism is not a team sport. You know, in other words, it's an individual effort. You know, there could, if there are people who are practicing counter racism code, following counter racism logic, they are not a gang. Now, the white people who practice racism, white supremacy, might see them as one, but they're not a gang. It's just, you know, a number of non-white people who have mutual interests or a common interest. So when I listen to you read that, I don't think that's referring to non-white people who are practicing counter racism. Somebody else used to say that counter racism is not a religion, but I think that was, you know, in an effort to poke at another guy who used to say that in order for counter racism to make any traction at all, it has to be merged with a person's religion. So I think he was just poking at him, but you know, and we can talk about that more as we get to the religion part of the book. We've not gotten there yet, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. So, anyone else?
If can you repeat the question? Hello? 05. Can you please repeat the question?
Can I be heard?
Yes,
Yes.
now you can.
All right. So at the on page 211,
Mhm.
it states during the existence of white supremacy, all non so-called gang members are the direct or indirect product of those people who participate in the practice of white supremacy. Therefore, during the existence of white supremacy, each and every non-white so-called gang member is at all times being used to speak and act violently to support racism, or he or she is speaking and acting to counter racism and resist being used to support racism, white supremacy. So the question is he is a code stating that this activity would be considered some sort of gang activity, because to me that's what it sounds like it's saying, but um I could be. I hope I'm incorrect, but yeah, I don't know. I really don't know what it.
This question reminds me of how in the past and when we've tried to recruit people, and for whatever reason, not trying to recruit necessarily, but just getting into discussions about counter racism, how people that former associates of mine have accused me of being in an organization, calling this an organization, saying that they don't want to be a part of our organization. So, I mean, this kind of this may be a gang. I don't know. um, but also on the other page it says we shouldn't belong to any kind of gang or anything. So um, that's just what that reminds me of. Maybe we are in a gang.
I I think I think it's meaning in the eyes of the white supremacists, in the eyes of the racist white supremacists, uh, non-white people are viewed as gang members, no matter what, whether you're in cooperation with white supremacy or you're in resistance to it.
That makes a lot of sense.
It does.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I have a point from the 1984 edition in regards to maybe this game question you was asking, and this is on page 136 of the 1984 edition. It says, avoid attending any meetings, assemblies, etc., of any kind at which white people are not welcome at all times. Reason, explanation. The correct purpose of any meeting, assembly, etc., is to reveal truth, promote justice, and promote correctness. White people should be welcome at any meeting, assembly, etc., in which the purpose is to reveal truth, promote justice, and promote correctness. Again, this is 1984 edition, page 136. Because like after reading that, I was like, well, I don't know if I can be here any longer. There's no white people here.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's dangerous to allow um white people. but I may be incorrect. You know, I may be incorrect.
Key words in there, it says any meeting in which white people are not welcome at all times. So that doesn't mean invited. I don't think that means the same thing. I think I'll give you an example I was in the Nation of Islam for like 10 years, and we had meetings that white people were not allowed to be in. Like, you know, they literally come to the front door and try to get in and say, you're not permitted, can't come in. I'm suspecting that that's along the lines of what it means. I've tend to notice, like I've seen, just listen to some of the lectures that Fuller would be giving, and there'd be white people in the room, and they were very interesting because you notice the reactions, and it seemed to me like the white person became the subject of questioning, right? Because they're in the room now, you're discussing the race issue, and here it is, there's an opportunity to learn more about what racism is and how it works. And oftentimes you can observe it when the white person doesn't even, it doesn't even look like the white person is trying to, like, what am I trying to say? They don't appear, it doesn't look like they're trying to give any information, but in the interaction between them and the non-white piece, the non-white person that's doing the questioning, it reveals a lot of constructive information. The only one that I could think of right now is it's I don't remember the title of it. Mr. Ed Williams probably remembers the title of it, but there's a video of Mr. Fuller and the racist suspect that went by the name of Cloud Song. I know she went by Cloud Song, I think, on the internet. Do you remember that one, Mr. Williams?
Oh, sorry. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, that a clip of that is on the Counter Racism website.
Right. I think that's where I heard it at. As a matter of fact, I heard it on your website. But yeah, I recommend that everyone go to Mr. Williams to go to that website. It's counterracism.com.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I recommend that you all go to that website and even look at the experiments, the counter-racist experiments that have been conducted between victims. The victims have conducted these experiments on white people. And you'll learn a lot of constructive information. And then on another aspect is the meetings. So a very harsh reality that I think a lot of non-white people, especially Black people, should recognize is how fearful they are of white people. And usually these meetings where no white people are welcome are meetings where victims can feel more comfortable. It's based on emotion, where when a white person comes in the room, and I've seen it so many times, when Black people are talking, we have this way of talking amongst each other, and then a white person comes in the room, and all of a sudden everybody's quiet. Nobody wants to talk the same kind of talk, to the extent that some will even whisper. And I think that it's a constructive move forward to get us out of the emotional and more into the logic by having white people present and saying in front of them what we're not comfortable saying when they're not around.
Agreed. Well, very, very well said. From 212, the code states, what should be the purpose of any social group in which you volunteer to participate in? Answer, do not willfully help as any so-called fraternities, club, sorority, social group, etc., that does not have as its reason for existence the elimination of racism and the establishment of justice and peace. Do not say anything about any person unless you are ready, willing, and able to repeat what you said to everyone in the known universe. Also, be very, very careful about repeating something that one person said, that another person said. It is very easy to make a mistake. People are often quoted incorrectly. Explanations. Sometimes with the best and correct intentions, people do not correctly repeat or correctly interpret what others have said. So I really like this piece of code. I try not everything I say. I have no problem repeating to whoever would ask me to. So I think this is really stand by. I think it also falls under by stand by your word, stand by your work um, category. But I may be slightly confused on this. Any comments?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on what think. I think that's about having spaces where white people are allowed to be is very important, because I feel for me that's where the power of the code is really revealed, and that is where white people show you better than non-white people practicing the code can tell you. Non-white people practicing the code can show you through the interaction with white people, like, and this thing when non-white people, when we're out by ourselves, we tend to show off to one another. I myself have been someone who's done that, I believe more than once. So it's very good to have white people amongst you. It's sometimes the fear I have is that if they're there, then they'll learn more about us and learn more about the code and be able to counter it. But the truth is they probably know about it already.
They do.
Yeah, they do. So, and what they don't know, they can find out faster than you can find out about them. Okay.
Real quick, if I could add to that, if I want to tell you a story. I bought a copy. This was years ago when I bought a copy of the 1984 version of the code off of Amazon, and I didn't realize I was buying it from Mr. Ed Williams, right? But when I talked to him, I don't know if you remember the conversation, how we talked, but I told you I was going to send it to someone in prison. And Mr. Williams, he said something like, good luck with that or something, right? And I didn't, in my mind when he said, I was like, I don't understand. I don't think they're going, why would they ban this book in prison? But it came back. And Mr. Williams had explained that it's been banned in prisons. A lot of prisons, I don't know if it's that way with all of them, but they will not accept the code book. They won't allow the prisoners and the victims in greater confinement to read the code.
Right.
Oh.
Right. I think the way we talk, I used to have a standard call-in meeting on the website, and I had it for years, and just decided to take it down. I think it was in 2017. Yeah, I got a brother that's in prison, and I tried to send it to him years and years ago. Yeah, they won't allow that. They don't want their prisoners thinking constructively. So
it's like they don't want what happened with Malcolm X to be repeated, or to be refined and repeated.
right. There was a prison guard I hear tell once who said that if all of the non-white people in the prison were reading instead of fighting each other, then he wouldn't be a prison guard. This was a white person that said that. Yeah. So they don't have enough bullets for everybody that's in prison.
Wow. Isn't that some sort of like subversion of the Constitution to not allow people to read a book? I don't know. I'm not familiar with the Constitution, but I believe someone has written a book regarding that.
Well, if you read the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, prisoners are, just slaves. according to the 13th Amendment. So, I mean, they're just property. They're not really people, according to that amendment.
Wow. So, wow. Really, really says a lot in 2021. System of racism and white supremacy. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I want to say too, real quick, since you said it, from my observation, that is one of the major ways that they practice racism, white supremacy, is by subverting the Constitution. Whenever they're they're always willing to subvert the Constitution when it comes to non-white people.
Oh, one thing I was gonna say too. I know recently on the Counter Racist podcast, with Mr. Fuller and Mr. Bobby, I do recall him mentioning that recently about people, writing in with like some complaints about not getting their package, or and Mr. Fuller was saying like, yeah, they don't allow his book in certain prisons. And I know when I got I had the 1984 code book first before I got like the other two code books. And I remember it was strange when I got the package. It looked like all tampered with and everything. And I know this happened recently too. When I got like some Shahrazad Ali books. I had bought 3, and the package came like halfway open, like where they're gonna fall out. So when you get certain books like the code book, like the packages do come like tampered with sometimes.
Yeah, there was a time I was selling more code books, the 1984 edition. I was selling more code books than Fuller was selling. He'll tell you that. And I was selling them to people all around the world from the website. And I would buy them a box at a time. I can't remember how many came in a box.
10?
Oh, no. No, it was more than 10. It was more like 25. 20 or 25 came in a big box. I would buy them from him, and he would sell them to me at his cost. And so I would buy them from him and resell them on the website, and use the difference to go toward the website. We had an agreement on that. But I would buy boxes from him, and a lot of times I wouldn't get those boxes for months at a time. And by the time I received it, the box was all torn up, and some of the code books were messed up. And yes, that's going to happen under the system. That's going to happen. There's no way to avoid it.
Yeah, I think the new cartons are around like 15 to 16. But I think I got it to pop up on the cart today because I was buying my birth mother her code book and her work guides. But sometimes it's not even an option to order the cartons on the website, but sometimes it is. So that could be the usual suspects that's play out as well. Or maybe that's no longer an option.
Yeah, what you mean birth mother?
No, I used to buy them directly from Fuller, so I didn't go through it.
Hold on.
Okay.
Apologies. To continue.
No, I was just saying I used to buy mine directly from Fuller. I would just call him up on the phone and say, "Hey, Fuller, I need another box," and send him the money, and he'd send me a box.
I had a similar arrangement till the sister Tanner stepped in and I couldn't buy any more from it. But I had a similar arrangement.
Okay, good to hear. You got a chance you could buy any more from him?
Yeah. He stopped selling them. He said he had got word that somebody was selling his counterfeit books or something.
Oh, wow.
And that I think her name was it was a sister named Tanner. that told him that, and after that, he stopped selling them to me. He said he wasn't going to sell them anymore. And I talked to some bookstores out here, one black bookstore, but they have 2 locations called Marcus Books. He stopped selling them to them as well for the same reason. He wanted to just stop selling the books wholesale until he got it together, which is, I think, is when he came out with the new edition, the revised edition.
Mr. Ethan, I see you have a hand. Okay, it could be, yeah.
I think it's from. I should have put my hand down.
That's okay. I realized it was an older one. No worries. So I think when I read this for the second time, one of the thoughts is like, wow, I don't think a lot of black people are ready for this, and I had no problem like digesting this and understanding this because I went through a phase where I was just investigating the police. Many years ago, I was just like I was paying close attention to what the police were doing, how they were getting all this new equipment, and I was like, why are the police getting all this military equipment? I would watch videos of like them getting like SWAT cars that look very similar to tanks, if you ask me. And I was also at the same time watching cops just kill black people and get away with it. And so when I read this part on the, oh yeah, and me seeing black people get killed over and over really put it in my mind that we are like just nothing more than like some sort of creature animals to be like killed and no one cares, and just to be killed so easily over what seemed to be nothing. So I always have like known that I'm not viewed as some sort of human, even though there's no such thing as a human while under this system. So on 213, I'm just gonna read all of it, but I think this makes a lot of sense, and I have no problem calling myself a black male or a black or a male person because under the system, that's one of the few things I am allowed to be. So yeah, and this was this was reinforced by just me witnessing black people, black males in particularly, being just slain and just murdered with no remorse. So this is from 213, and it says, on family, black males, do not say that you are a man unless you can prove to yourself and others, according to the evidence, that you are not subject to the system of white supremacy racism, and that none of your spouses, mates, or offspring are directly or indirectly subject to the power and or the will of any white person who practices white supremacy in any area of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war / kind of war. Notes: during the existence of white supremacy racism, and according to compensatory counter-racist logic, it is incorrect for any non-white male person to identify himself as a man. It is correct for him to identify himself as a person, as a male person, or as a victim of white supremacy racism. Because of the effects of white supremacy racism, every non-white person is a child, and every white supremacist racist man and racist woman is a master child molester. Question: since victims of racism, non-white people are not allowed to function as families while they are subject to the system of white supremacy, what should non-white males, non-white females, and their offspring do? What can they do? Answer: instead of thinking of themselves as a so-called family, each non-white person should think of himself or herself as an individual victim of white supremacy. As such, should do all that he or she can do to help those who need the most help, particularly those who are usually nearest to them, so-called close kin, and who usually expect and need constructive help from them, mate, offspring, etc. So reading this put a lot of things into perspective in my victim unit, and it just really explains why non-white people, so-called families, are always in total dysfunction, and it's because we're just not allowed to be family due to the total domination of white supremacy, racism. Would anyone like to comment?
On the black males thing, I think I said it earlier in the call when we had first started. There's no such thing as a high value black man in the system of racism, white supremacy.
Agreed. Alrighty, perhaps we could get into closing comments. It seems, unless there are more notes to be shared, or
Well, I'd like to thank you for the CRWS book club, and I'd like to thank everyone that attended for the constructive conversation.
thank you. Thanks for sharing all of your insight and just using your time and energy to teach. And yeah, so thank you as well. And of course, this would not be a activity all without everyone here. My closing comments is I think um politics, people relations is like really um profound, and philosophy. I think this is some sort of like, this is just I don't know, for lack of a better word, I won't say powerful stuff. It really has put a lot of things in perspective for me, and um yeah, it really just breaks down how we have been trained to interact with each other, and just the true position that we are in, and also gives us the logic to understand that it doesn't have to be this way, and we could totally produce justice if we develop into serious thinkers and problem solvers in effective numbers.
Uh,
For my closing comment, Area 6 politics, very constructive information that I can put into practice immediately. This conversation was very constructive. I learned a lot, found it very insightful. This area in particular really is going to help me in exactly what it says, people relations, and how I'm able to relate to other people, and how I can be more codified in those interactions. That's it for my closing comments. See you guys next week.
for my closing comments, we are our own independent leaders. We are all here on our own limited will, I guess. I won't use free will. I'll say limited will. We're all here on that. And white people can show you better than I can tell you.
Miss
Thank you very much for hosting this, and thank you for the sharing. And I feel like I I got some new insight today, and I really appreciate that. Um, and White people can definitely show you better. And I have a question for Edward. Mr. Fuller, and a conversation between Mr. Fuller and white female, is that the file that you're referring to with this cloud woman on your counter-racism website? Thank you very much for today.
Thank you.
Are you there, Mr. Williams?
Oh no, Mr. Williams checked out.
Okay, yeah. So to answer the question, yeah, that is it. I can answer that question. Yep, you're welcome.
Can you post that and send that to me, Mr. Eaton, or post it in the chat?
Roger that.
Thank you. Miss Carice, would you like to share a closing comment?
Yes. My closing comments is us as Black people, we have bigger ideas that we need to strive to. This section just taught us that all the glorification, the seeking attention, and etc. of the Black culture is so what it's not supposed to be. That we kind of have to know what kind of lifestyle we want to live, because we got used to this system and how it works. So just the insight that I learned from everyone else and this chapter was very helpful, and always keep your word at things and always try to see the ideas of how you could seek justice in this system.
Your closing comment reminds me that we didn't really talk about ghetto culture so much. So I'm gonna read this part of the code, and then maybe Dr. Sankiu can share a closing comment. But from 210, the question states, what part of the ghetto culture should be promoted? Answer: none. It is correct to willfully or deliberately say or do anything that helps to promote or support the ghetto culture. Examples: talking about sexual conquest, insulting remarks, name calling, using profanity, bragging about possessions, stealing, robbing, fighting, maiming, or killing for prestige, trivial possessions, or fun. Some suggestions: spend as little money for practical for anything. Well, let me start over. Spend as little money as is practical for anything that is to be used mostly for purposes of showing off: clothing, trinkets, vehicles, etc. Try to buy what is necessary and constructive. Do not speak and act in support of ghetto glorification, as it is usually practiced by non-white people who try to glorify or celebrate their condition of racial subjugation. Do not talk in a slurred or whiny manner. Do not walk in an artificial manner. Walk in a manner that gets you where you need to be, in a manner that is efficient and non-attention getting. So yeah, that is a culture that actually needs to be canceled. It's ghetto culture and white supremacist racism culture. Um, Dr. Sinki, would you like to share a closing comment?
Yeah, I'd like to say that I believe that it is by design that the racist white supremacists push the ghetto culture on us to keep us confused. And I want to work to do what I can to to eliminate it, but it seems to me like they're moving at the speed of light. They're promoting that culture, 186,000 miles per second. And yeah, that's it. I lost my thought.
Well, that still was very, very true what was shared. Yeah, thanks everyone for their closing comments, and we'll see everyone next week.